Hi everybody, welcome to the next in our Facebook Live session series. Tonight we're joined by James from GemServe to talk about the boiler upgrade scheme, which obviously affects you guys out there who are wanting to fit heat pumps to people's heating systems. I'm going to start by letting James introduce himself and talk a little bit about what he's going to cover, and then we'll crack on with some questions. Over to you, James.
Thank you very much, Claire. Good evening, everyone. Just to introduce myself, as Claire suggested, my name is James Timbs-Harrison. I currently work for a policy advocacy company. Quite a long description of basically what we do, but we help to shape industry policy for low carbon initiatives, products and services. So quite involved in sort of policy work, working with government, talking to civil service and Whitehall about everything with low carbon. But I'm probably here today, I guess, from some of my previous background. I used to work for, I won't say their brand name, but I used to work for the market leading heat pump manufacturer as their senior product manager. And I was involved with and conducted myself development work, launching products and managing all of their domestic and commercial heat pump products within the UK. And through my time there, I've developed everything from cylinders to heat pumps to commercial products and many other bits and pieces. So hopefully today I should be able to answer some of the questions given the policy work and the heat pump work. And during this time as well, I think I've had the pleasure of seeing the introduction of the Renewable Heat Incentive, the 𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺, and now get to see the demise of it and the reintroduction of yet another new scheme. And here today to talk about that new scheme, the boiler upgrade scheme.
Brilliant, thanks, James. So I think we need to start out with tell us what the boiler upgrade scheme is all about.
Okay, the boiler upgrade scheme. It did actually have a very short period of time called the Clean Heat Grant, whilst government still got their head around exactly what it was that they were doing with it. But the boiler upgrade scheme replaces wholly the renewable heat incentive. It's a scheme designed to provide financial input to individuals and homeowners that are purchasing or making purchase decisions on renewable products. And it will affect all new installations from the 1st of April. So 𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺 ended at the end of March, and the boiler upgrade scheme takes over from the 1st of April. And it will provide vouchers, upfront vouchers, which I'll go into in just a second, to technologies that have been installed, and different amounts for each technology. We've got air source heat pumps, which will attract a voucher payment of £5,000. Biomass boilers, again £5,000, and ground source heat pumps, which is £6,000. And the voucher will actually be issued at the point of contractual agreement between yourselves as installers, making that agreement with the householder, and the validity of that voucher will actually last for 3 months, and once claimed will be paid by the government, which is actually in effect Ofgem, paid that within 14 days to you as an installer.
Okay, cool. And so you mentioned the 𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺 just then, and so how is this different, and why is it better than the 𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺 scheme?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's government showing willingness and backing to technologies that they believe are really important to hitting the carbon targets that government have signed up to. So in essence, from government's point of view, they're providing stimulus or a catalyst to get a market moving and to get installers and homeowners interested in technologies. It definitely worked for the feed-in tariff, and the renewable incentive was a success. But I think quite often and through these schemes, I think what's happened really is that the markets realize that the people that can install this stuff tend to be people that have got the money to use it up front. And we're not talking about a small investment. We're talking about thousands of pounds. So 𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺, the boiler upgrade scheme, I call it 𝗵𝗲𝗁. I don't know if that's a good way of using the acronym. Will we be giving people money up front rather than expecting people to take advantage of payments over a period of years. So what that will mean is that individuals and homeowners will be able to get that cash injection, that capital up front on day one. And what I think really what this should open up is the ability for a wider selection and a wider cross-section of society to be able to install renewable heating equipment, rather than quite often these sorts of schemes are sort of described as schemes for the rich, perhaps, or schemes for people with money in their back pocket that can provide that kind of investment. So for me, that's why it's better. It's removing some of those upfront reasons for people, let's say, perhaps considering renewable technology. They might come to you for a quote, but when they get the number and they look at it, they just say, I don't know if I can afford that right now. So that's what it's looking to tackle, and that's why I do feel that it's better than the previous scheme.
Yeah, like not everyone's got £8,000 in their back pocket or in their savings account to kind of make room for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So what technologies are eligible under the new boiler upgrade scheme?
So I mentioned them very briefly to the first question that you asked, Claire. But yeah, to go into a bit more detail, I think that's important because the people that are actually installing this and answering the questions need to know the detailed information. So the technologies that are eligible for this are an air source heat pump, or sometimes called an air to water heat pump. Technology has been around for quite some time now, was always eligible under the renewable heat incentive. And to be honest with you, regarding the technology itself, not a lot has changed in the criteria. So we're looking for, or Ofgem will be looking for, products that are listed on the MCS database, and that I should say, strictly speaking, listed on the day of the installation, because of course things can change over time. So that means that all air source heat pumps that are listed currently under the MCS database on the day of the installation will be eligible for the grant. But quite sometimes used in this market are hybrid systems. The amalgamation of let's say a traditional fossil fuel system with a heat pump are not eligible under this new scheme, which there were ways of making them eligible under the previous renewable heat incentive. So that's sort of one nuanced change in the way that the boiler upgrade scheme will work. The second technology to talk about is ground source heat pumps. Again, a hugely successful and hugely highly deployed product under the renewable heat incentive, and that too will be eligible under the new scheme, and exactly the same rules. If it's on the MCS list on the day of the installation, it'll pull through to Ofgem and therefore eligible under the scheme. So they're the two heat pump technologies. There are other heat pump technologies out there, but the government really want to focus on the two core technologies that they believe are fundamental to achieving the targets. And the third technology isn't a heat pump at all. It's a biomass boiler. This piece of technology has been within renewable heat incentive since its inception, and a piece of technology that actually gets deployed for a really difficult portion of the market. So we quite often see biomass boilers used in buildings where perhaps it's quite often talked about as hard to treat properties. So we're talking about your big sort of country house type properties where perhaps insulation is almost impossible, quite leaky buildings, quite big wholesome rooms that need serious power to get them up to temperature. And the government through the renewable heat incentive realize that that's the key demographic or I shouldn't say demographic, it's probably the wrong word, but the key kind of market for that product. So what they've done is sort of honed that a little bit. So if you in the biomass boiler market, they're really going to hone that down to the installer showing evidence that essentially that there's no way a heat pump could be used in that property. It's truly off gas grid and it's a truly rural property. So I think biomass boilers will play their part in this story, but largely speaking, the technology that will be deployed under the boiler upgrade scheme, as far as 𝗵𝗲𝗁 are trying to engineer it, will be heat pumps.
Okay, cool. And somebody's actually posted a question. Raheel has posted asking, are there no vouchers for solar thermal?
No, so solar thermal has in fact been removed from, well, removed isn't the right word, but it ended under the renewable heat incentive and indeed won't pull through into the boiler upgrade scheme.
Okay, cool. Hope that answers your question, Raheel. And how? So once the installer applies for the voucher and they've got the installation, how long are they valid for? So the voucher presumably has got a valid date, and how long? What's that sort of look like?
Yeah, so this is a new way of doing it, I guess, for the scheme. So the renewable heat incentive paid people from day one of the installation being ready. So a voucher scheme, an upfront payment, of course, government wants to protect themselves. You know, if they paid you the money on application, how do they ensure that the technology was installed? We don't want to end up with a situation where people are gaming the system. So there's a little bit of admin at the front end. So you apply as the installer on behalf of the end user or the household. And the voucher will last for a period of 3 months for air source heat pumps and biomass technology, and 6 months for ground source heat pumps. So I don't know if anybody here has any experience of ground source heat pumps, but a far greater undertaking in terms of infrastructure, drilling, getting rights and permissions to bringing in big drilling gear and stuff like that. So, the process could take a little bit longer for a ground source heat pump. Not all the time. Lots are installed very, very quickly, but there are things that could perhaps get in the way that wouldn't get in the way of a traditional air source installation. So they're given a little bit longer. So the period of the voucher would last for 3 months. And government aren't looking to try and create problems here. So if the installation isn't completed within that time, then the installer will just reapply for that householder and get another extension based on almost any reason that has come up in that period. But yeah, the 3 month period just makes sure that there's a bit of protection for the government to ensure that the technology is installed, it gets registered, the MCS certificate number gets pulled through, and then the payment's made.
Okay, so like if you run over your 3 months, it's not the end of the world. You can pretty much guarantee that you'll be able to reapply and get approved again.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if I was off 𝗵𝗲𝗁 or 𝗵𝗲𝗁𝗍, which I'm not, just to be absolutely clear, perhaps they would answer that question and say, well, of course, unless nothing's changed in that period, never say never. I'm sure, government goes through lots of changes and issues over time. So their official response will probably be as long as nothing's changed in that period. But day to day, under normal circumstances, they would encourage the installer just to reapply and then and get that extension to that job.
Great. And just going back to the question before about the technologies that are included within the grant, there's another question from Nick who's asked, what about hydrogen boilers? Is that a completely separate matter?
It is indeed, yeah. I mean, I have a lot of colleagues that work in the hydrogen space, and it's a technology that is gathering an awful lot of attention and technology R&D in the market, and quite rightly. It's a fantastic technology that I think is going to play a really important role, the hydrogen gas itself in all aspects of life, from cars to industrial processes to heating homes, but it's a technology that still needs an awful lot of time to get sign off, health and safety, transportation of the substance itself, and there's a period of learning that still needs to happen for that as a technology. So it's not part of this particular incentive scheme on the market, but I'm absolutely sure that in the future, as the technology gathers momentum and the sort of teething things that happen at the start of a technology introduction have all been dealt with, we'll see that technology form part of incentivized industries in the future. So yeah, not part of this particular scheme, but I would say that it's definitely part of the roadmap for the future.
The future of the heating. Fantastic. So big question, obviously everyone's going to want to know, you've got your voucher, you've got it approved for your install, and how quickly am I as an installer going to get paid for the work that I've just done, and or the the work that I've paid for?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that the way the government sees this is that effectively you would contractually engage with the end user. They would sign up to say that they want the equipment installed. I think under normal situations is people pay some kind of deposit to start the works, and at that point, offering that quote for the job and that contractual arrangement is that you would quote, let's say it's $8,000 in the example that you gave before, Claire, and that it would be discounted by the voucher value, so £5,000. So that the resulting invoice effectively that needs to be paid by the end user would be that £3,000. And then at the end of the installation, on completion of the job, you'd be looking for payment from that end user, and you would also then, at that registration point of the equipment with Ofgem, that triggers Ofgem to then release the funds to you as the installer. And at that point, there's an up to 14 days for Ofgem to transfer those funds to you as the installer for the completion of that job. So effectively, at the end of the job, at the point of completion, when you'd be expecting payment from the end user, of which there will be some left to pay by the end user, that also triggers Ofgem to make their payments. So it's a 14-day period. I think that seems sort of common. I don't know why 14 days is always the thing. We're going to refund you a payment that you just paid, and it took you 10 minutes to make it, but 14 days to get your refund.
14 days to get back. You must wait until you can see it in your bank account.
Indeed, yeah. So that's what Ofgem has set. The nuances within that and whether it could be quicker, I couldn't say off the top of my head, but I know that that's the period that they've quoted right now.
Okay, cool. So we've talked a bit about the money and the vouchers, but not much about the actual properties themselves. Like, is there an eligibility criteria for the properties that these things are being put into?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those areas that I think is probably a lesser known part of what was within the renewable heat incentive, and it's something that I definitely believe in myself. I'm always a big advocate of wrap your building first. It doesn't matter what you're doing to it, whether you're putting a new boiler in, new radiators, trying to get your bills down. The first thing to do is stop throwing away useful heat, basically. Why leak it out your roof if you don't have to? So I think government has very much follows that same track, and it's some people have sort of taken this to be a peculiarity of the technologies, heat pumps, biomass boilers, that they don't work unless the building's insulated. But what government has said here is it's not about the technology you're deploying, it's about the fact that effectively what we're talking about is money that's coming out of Treasury. So it's taxpayers' money. And what they don't want to see is that money wasted. So what they're asking for is that as a bare minimum, that the EPC for the building, for the property that you're installing the heat pump on, is up to date and valid. a given, an easy one,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's no outstanding basic recommendations for that property. So that means that the property has had its loft insulated, and if it has cavity walls, that they're also filled. So they're two basic elements to the properties that you would be looking at if you're an installer, that you would check that EPC, almost probably the first thing that you would do. If you had an inquiry, yeah, you can go onto the website, check the EPC, make sure those things are done. Because if they're not, it would be an awfully long, wasted period for an installer to start doing quotes and talking to them, only to find that out later. So I think
And
first
that's
port would
the responsibility of the homeowner, right, to have their EPC certificate up to date and make sure that it's all registered and all of that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think EPCs are one of the, we've gone through a period where, it was this thing that you had to do if you sold it, or rented properties out, that kind of thing, but EPCs have been around for a long time now. I think the vast majority of properties have had EPCs done. If you've been in your home for 20 years, perhaps not, but, most people have EPCs done, and I think loft insulation is something that went through a huge growth phase, sort of 15-20 years ago. So we're not talking about insulation or things that you probably wouldn't expect to see, but as a bare minimum, government are just saying that what we don't want to do is be accused of throwing away good money, or literally burning money and putting it out the roof. So they're two aspects that they want to see. In terms of eligibility criteria, I can't say the word either, Claire, for the property. Yeah,
it's that word. Okay, great. And so that's the eligibility of the property. What about the installer? So what do they have to be? How do they become registered? Do they need to be registered? What's the sort of setup there?
So there's some registration bits with Ofgem and the scheme, but ultimately the thing that makes an installer able to take advantage of this market is MCS. MCS is used as a vehicle to, I guess it's sort of a quality standard. I think MCS would probably shout at me for saying that, but essentially what the vehicle that they're using here is to try and ensure that you've got trained individuals that understand the technology, that are to some extent held to account for what they've done. I think certainly new technologies that come to market, as I'm sure many of you in the heating industry have seen stuff come and go, and sort of new fandangled widgets that get launched and no one knows whether they work or not, and promise the world, and then within a year they're gone. And I think MCS is there to try and protect the end user from that. So MCS is a gateway to gaining access to this grant scheme, or to this voucher scheme. And it's a requirement of all installers that are playing in this market, or I shouldn't say playing in this market, because the market goes beyond just the incentivized proportion of it. But anybody who wants to take advantage of the boiler upgrade scheme does need to be MCS registered. And I say that flippantly, MCS registered. It's more than just a registration scheme, of course. There's a visit to the business. There's checks on the first installation that's done, all that kind of stuff that goes with it. So I hope I'm not making light of the effort and work that's required to maintain and keep MCS registration, but that is ultimately the eligibility requirements of the installer before you can move to that next stage of offering that voucher, that grant to the installation.
Okay, cool. Okay. So the actual heat pumps and heating devices that are being used in the install, are there any requirements on those?
Yeah, so I think this is a big. I feel I should apologise for keep mentioning RHI, because perhaps it's not something you ever saw or have had any interest in previously. But I think it's talked about in that way because I'm making a comparison to how things were to how things are going to be. But under 𝗺𝗺𝗺𝗺, there were quite complex calculations for the installer and potentially even the end user to some extent to look at the flow temperature, look at the number of hours of heating to get your energy requirement, your kilowatt hour requirement of the building, and then make calculations on that, on the efficiency, to work out how much 𝗺𝗺𝗺 payment would be paid over the 7 years. So lots and lots of variables and unknowns on that first day when you walk into a property and someone says they're interested in installing something, installing a heat pump in this particular example that I'm giving. It'd almost be quite difficult to say how much money they would receive. Under this scheme, that's all been simplified. So the payment is £5,000 and that's it. So it's hugely simplified. There is, however, just referring back to what I said before about government not wanting to waste their money, there's a check that's done by Ofgem to ensure that the efficiency of the system is sufficiently high to warrant them putting taxpayers' money on the back of it. And that efficiency level is 2.8 SCOP, or seasonal coefficient of performance. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's effectively a calculation done of energy into the compressor versus the energy you get out. I should say power in versus power out. So you get 2.8 units for every 1 unit that you put into it. So there's a little calculation that's done by Ofgem. You say, I'm going to run my heat pump that I'm installing in this property at 45 degrees. Ofgem do a quick calculation on a table from MCS, all done in the background. They check the box to say it meets the 2.8 requirement, and that's it, job done. I would say probably that figure is not going to be challenging for the vast majority of kit and of installation designs that people use in the market. If you had a particular property where you need to run the heat pump particularly hard, let's say at the sort of 55 degree or perhaps even more mark, you're starting to get to that magic number there. So if you're installing around the sort of 45 to 50, I don't think you're gonna have an issue there. But if you're at that top end, it's worth probably just checking on the MCS database to make sure that it does meet that minimum requirement before you go through the whole process. So if you were an installer and you were putting your application in, you'd put that information in, and Ofgem would just check the database to make sure that ticks the box. But gone are the complex calculations and the I'm walking into an end user or a homeowner's property and not having a clue as to really what it is that I'm offering them or what it is that they might get off the back of it. We know right up front it's £5,000 or £6,000 if it's a ground source heat pump, and all you just need to do is just make sure that the design of the system meets that little requirement there.
So that calculation of your SCOP 2.8 minimum, that's done like at the beginning when you design the system and you talk about how it's going to be set up, what the flow temperatures are going to be, and that's where you go onto the database and do that check at that point.
Yeah, if I was an installer, that's the due diligence that I would go through just to double check. I mean, most installers, I think, tend to find a brand that they can work with. When I say brand, I mean manufacturer, I guess. Find someone that they can work with that provides support and knowledge and all the rest of it that goes with it. So they probably get to understand the boxes that they're using, and largely speaking, probably wouldn't even need to refer to that. It's just probably stuff that I'm sure that installers that are installing kit regularly get to understand and get to know those sorts of numbers off the top of their head. But yeah, all the data's there sitting on the MCS database. So if it's a new box to you or a new box or to new market for you, then yeah, it's all on the database. It's a very quick look on the database, and you literally say, I want to run it at 45 degrees. What's the efficiency? Check.
Right. Okay, cool. And an interesting one just coming in from Simon, who says MCS for air source has been split into two: system design and installation. Do businesses have to be registered for both in order to get this, be able to do the heat pumps and get the grant?
No, but they can be. So strictly speaking, to answer a question, no, they don't need to be registered for both, but that doesn't mean that you can't do both. So up until now, it was just one big design standard. I think it's called MIS 3005. And now it's been brought into MIS 3005I installation and MIS 3005D, I think, for design. So the idea of that was to enable the market, I guess, to find its strengths. So some people have the strength of and historical knowledge and capability to do all the installation work. Great pipe work, lovely soldered copper pipe work. That's what they specialize in and they're good at. And the design work and the back of house stuff that happens for jobs that are installed under MCS could be done by another organization. Sometimes this is called like umbrella organizations, perhaps where a design company finds jobs, gets jobs, does all the design work, and then effectively subs out the installation work to installers that hold, as rightly said by the person who answered the question or asked the question, is that installation standard that's been met by the installer can then be done under that scheme. It doesn't have to be an umbrella scheme. It could be that you have another organization or friend or company that can do the design work. They're really good at that bit, and you're really good at the installation bit, and then you can provide the solution together as an installed MCS job.
Right.
As far as Ofgem and the scheme are concerned, it just has to have an MCS number at the end of it. So as long as within the MCS scheme, those boxes are checked, the boiler upgrade scheme is really only interested in the certified number that you get at the end of it.
Okay, cool. Simon, I hope that answers your question. If not, then let us know, and we'll do what we can to explain a bit more. There's another one from Raheel again. Is there any assistance for installers to fund getting the air source heat pump, ground source heat pump qualifications and to go through the process?
This is a great question, and one that I should be better at answering than I think I'm going to be. The answer is yes, there are. Am I aware of exactly something that I could put forward on this? No, and I think I'd have to come back to you with some more information on what that actually is. But it's a growing market, and it's a market that is crying out for. I mean, talking to government and talking to stakeholders around the industry, this is a market that is crying out for installers. It's, prices have somewhat drifted in this market up because there just aren't enough people quoting for jobs. So I think this is a market that's growing. There's a need for more installers and skills in this market, and because of that, there definitely are there is financial assistance through free courses, and checking the boxes that are required to get to that MCS qualification. And I'm very much aware of manufacturers that have signed up to full qualification training now. I wouldn't want to list anyone in particular, but there's definitely manufacturers out there of heat pumps that have courses that tick those boxes that are required to get to that next stage of MCS sign off. And they are, some are priced, some are offering things that go alongside it. And I know government is definitely supporting the idea that we need as many installers as possible. So yes, the answer is yes. And I think if it's okay with you, Claire, then I could provide a bit more information after the chat, and perhaps send some links.
Yeah, Raheel, what we'll do is we'll get James can do some digging and find out a bit more information for us, and then I'll post answers and links and details and information in the thread of the video, so you'll be able to see it probably early next week by the time we get the weekend and the bank holiday out the way, but hopefully that will be useful to you. So next up, any key dates? So is there any key dates that the guys need to know about in terms of when it? I know it launched at the beginning of April, but yeah, anything they need to know about those dates?
Yeah, so I think I can't even believe the date. It's the 28th of April. It seems bizarre because I feel like I was only sending information to you, Claire, and other people around the industry that it will be the 1st of April rather than that's a date that's already now gone. So the RHI finished at the end of March, and the boiler upgrade scheme starts from the 1st of April. Now gone, started on the 1st of April. So all equipment installed from now, literally, will be eligible for the boiler upgrade scheme. Now, I am going to say something here that effectively is that government, Ofgem, I don't know who, but somebody's dropped the ball a little bit here. So the dates don't quite match up. So the date at which the first installations can be registered on Ofgem is the 23rd of May. So we still actually got another few weeks before the system, the Ofgem system, will allow you to register the job. Now, of course, some of you might be saying, well, that means I'm installing equipment now, but I won't get paid for it an absolute minimum 4 weeks before I can register the job, and then a period that would after that for them to actually make the payment. And that is absolutely true. So for any new people getting into the industry, I don't think this really makes much difference because that period would be probably a little bit shorter than the period it's going to take you to go through the MCS process. But for anybody who's actually MCS registered right now and is just interested in a bit more information around this, yeah, I think this is a little bit, let's call it a slow period for the market whilst Ofgem whilst we're waiting for that date to come around the 23rd of May before the jobs can be registered. So yeah, I think the guys upstairs, let's say, have perhaps dropped the ball a little bit around this, but from the 23rd of May, it's open season for applying for and getting vouchers under the boiler upgrade scheme. What I would say in the meantime, though, is that Ofgem have now opened up their I don't know what you'd call it, like setting up your profile as an installer on the scheme. So installers can start setting up their profile, get all their details into there, do the little bit of due diligence that's required. I think they do a bit of due diligence around like company director. So they look on Companies House and make sure you're a legitimate company, all that kind of stuff. So you can do all that now, ready, and then be ready, poised literally with your finger over your mouse to register the jobs from the 23rd of May. So anybody who ticks all those boxes, definitely get your account set up so you're ready to go. And Ofgem have said, I don't want to use all their excuses for them, but they have said that on that date you can imagine it's going to be pretty busy. A lot of people registering jobs that are legacy jobs in that period, so there's certainly going to be a little bit of to and fro, let's say, in those first couple of weeks. But
backlog.
Yeah, a little bit of a backlog. Yeah, I think that's right to say, Claire. But they're the dates. We've definitely, as an industry, explained how important it is that they're ready to go on that date and that they're ready for that backlog of jobs to come through. So they're going to resource it to make sure that they're able to deal with that. But the 23rd of May is the first day of which people can register their jobs.
Okay, but they can register anything that's happened since the 1st of April.
Absolutely, yeah. So any jobs that are happening now are all eligible and can be registered as a completed job on the 23rd of May.
Brilliant, great. And a question about VAT, not my specialist subject, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So I know in the summer statement they changed VAT on energy saving measures. What's the implication for this scheme here? So do I, as a homeowner, when I get my £8,000 bill from you for fitting my heat pump, are you going to then whack VAT on top of it?
Good question. In the past, yes. In the future, no. So this is a huge change, and it's something that as a policy advocate within this space, so moving from being a manufacturer to somebody who's working on the policy side, this has been something we've been arguing for so long now. Is that you have these peculiarities in the way that VAT's applied to products like this, products that provide balancing on heating systems, lots of different products that are doing really good stuff out there that should be attracting a 0% rate of VAT, or as it was a 5% rate of VAT, a reduced rate of VAT. And there was a huge amount of complication on how it was applied and when it could be applied and if it was part of an installation or not part of installation. And that's all been simplified, which is great. So there's effectively a 0% rate of VAT applied to the full installation. So to answer your question, Claire, no, VAT should not be applied to the installation of heat pumps at the point of the end user getting their bill. No.
Great. So that means the heat pump itself, the installer's labour time, and any controls that go with it that are bought separately or anything, all of that comes in as 0 rated, and
correct.
There's no additional costs on top for the homeowner.
Correct. Yeah, I'm not HMRC. So that is always an issue that should be referred to your accountant and HMRC and all that kind of stuff. That's me just giving a little bit of terms and conditions, if you like, small print at the end. But because everyone's got different circumstances, you might be someone who's registered in another country. I don't know. I'm sure there's peculiarities to it, but as far as the announcement that was made and what's come through. There's a 0% rate of VAT for your kind of normal installed products that are saving energy in the home, and that is a full heat pump installation.
Fantastic. That is great, James. Well, if anyone's got any more questions, then stick them in the chat. Otherwise, we're gonna wrap up now. James, it's been brilliant, really, really useful. I hope everybody who's watching has found it a useful session, and any questions you did have been answered. If you have any further questions, as I say, do put them in the comments, and I can always email James tomorrow and find out the answers to them, because I won't know. But I think we'll probably sign off now. Thanks for your time, James, and thanks for everything.
My pleasure. Thanks, Claire.
See you all soon. Ciao.